You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cantina Cast. This is episode 242, Asajj Ventress. My name's Albert Padilla. I'll be your host tonight, and joining me, still fresh off his San Diego Comic-Con high, TV's Jonesy. Jonesy, how's it going? Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Seems like we just did this yesterday. Well,
I think you did do this yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and I was not a part of that. I'm glad you guys got a chance to sit down and kind of talk about all of the San Diego Comic-Con stuff, which we're going to get to in just a second, because that's going to be primarily what we're going to be hitting in terms of the news that's kind of occurred. A lot of stuff there. But before we get started, this show is really, we talked about, so we kind of threw a poll out there, I think, on social media, on a couple of the sites, and we made you have to pick your children. So we gave you a choice between Asajj Ventress and Rex, and I think the majority was Asajj Ventress. So we're going to do, I think, two parts of this. This episode will be part one, part two of Assaj. And then we're going to probably come back and do some more of the Clone Wars Legacy stuff. So we'll probably get into Darth Maul, son of Dathomir, Crystal Crisis on Utapau, maybe some Bad Batch. And then we promised that we would come back and do Rex. So we are going to do that. And we were just kind of talking about that before we came on the air, that may be a two-parter as well. So a lot of exciting stuff there. Anything particular that you're looking forward to out of that little list that I just threw out there?
Son of Dathomir is a comic that I haven't had the chance to dig into. And I think that's probably been obvious the last couple of shows where I'm missing some pieces. So I'm excited to really get into that one and see some of the in-between that I've been hoping to see and to hear more about. And actually see that in the comic book. But I think it's really funny because we didn't plan for this all to align with San Diego Comic-Con and all the Clone Wars news we've got and all the excitement. It's just kind of dumb luck a little bit. But I think it goes back and just shows you how wonderful this series was and how much energy and excitement it generates, and really how much depth there is to it, to where you can go back and revisit it and see things you didn't see before, or take new meaning from it and see something different, especially now that we've got, 6 seasons of it plus additional content. So it's a lot of fun to go back and look at some of that and explore things we haven't done before, but also revisit some of the things that it may have changed for us. But Albert, I'm dying to know. So Mike and I shared our comments about the Clone War trailer and the panel, but dying to hear your initial thoughts on all that.
Yeah, so let's get into that with the news. And I would say we'll just start off with the Clone Wars trailer, because I wasn't expecting, and I'm going to apologize up front because I haven't had a chance to listen to your show, so the one you guys did. So if I say anything or repeat anything, that's not planned. But I was not expecting this. In fact, I was kind of like, Clone Wars. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Clone Wars fan, but I just really was not expecting to get any kind of news out of this. And as I was seeing the tweets go by, I just started to kind of get subdued into thinking that there really wasn't anything here other than, hey, a bunch of good memories and walk down memory lane with all the cast and the actors and the crew and that sort of thing. And then that trailer came out, and I think I was at work when that happened. I hope nobody from work's listening to this. I left like my desk and immediately got on social media, and I was trying to get the trailer and get it posted out there and do all these things. And I didn't really get to absorb it. I saw it just because I was trying to work on that stuff for social media, but it was kind of emotional, right? Because we didn't really, especially the way Clone Wars just kind of, I guess, tapered off and the way it flamed out. I don't know if that's probably not the best word, because it had some good stuff there at the very end, but it just went through this, troubled era at time when we were kind of getting bounced around, and it was just kind of hitting its stride. In my opinion, we were getting some of the best content out of like season 3, season 4.
Agreed. Yeah.
That it felt like it was in its prime, and it just felt like it was leaving too soon. And then of course with like Siege of Mandalore, that was one of those things that I was really looking forward to. And knowing that probably, was going to be coming at some point. How are they going to tie all this up, especially the Clone Wars itself? And we never got it. And then later on, fast forward, we had some bits and pieces of it that were kind of, Filoni spoke about it at some of the celebrations, and we've got some of the stuff that we kind of just mentioned earlier in the show that we wanted to revisit here on this show. But that was really it. We didn't get a whole lot. I was pretty happy when Rebels came out and there was a mention of Caesar Mandalore there. I was happy when it was mentioned in the Ahsoka novel as well. But it just felt like there was this part of me, I guess, or part of my Clone Wars fandom that was missing. And I think all of that, just everything that I just said there ran through my head in about 5 seconds as I was watching that trailer. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's 12 episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm curious to see where it picks up, and well, the whole thing really, but where it picks up, and especially where it ends off. What are we going to see at the very end of this? Is it going to tie into Rebels? Are we going to get a flash forward of some type? Did we get some of the missing pieces that we just kind of, either has been mentioned that is canon, but we've never seen, read in any way? Or is this going to be, are they going to throw us a curveball and give us something really special there that we aren't anticipating? So
what I think is
those
great
are kind of my initial thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, what I think is great about it, to your point, was we got some pseudo endings with season 5 and 6. So we could have been okay with Ahsoka leaving. That would have been heart wrenching and a real tough way to end it. And then we got the Lost Missions, which had some great content in there. But again, it was more of, felt like restructuring shows to make it feel like an ending, but it wasn't a real natural conclusion like Filoni got with season 4 of Rebels. He was able to have the advance warning to go ahead and, the series is going to end. Let's actually end it. And he talked a lot about that during the end of Rebels, right? He didn't get that opportunity with Clone Wars. What's a little funny is thinking back to those comments of, how long has this been in the making, to where was he making those comments when he knew that they were working on more Clone Wars content? But if this thing sticks to 12 and that's really all they're going to do, and that's definitive, at least he'll be able to end it the way that he envisions it ending, and in a way that he talked a lot about George Lucas during the panel, and the ability to end it in a way that is consistent with the ideas that George had when he brought the series around. I think that's really cool. And
I would say the other, I guess, observation that I made when this announcement happened, and this was about the next 24 to 48 hours, everybody was happy, it seemed like, in Star Wars fandom again.
Oh, it was insane. The number of tweets and the excitement. Yeah.
Right. I liken this to that first week when Pokemon Go came out and everybody was happy in the world because we were all playing this Pokemon Go game. It was very similar. Like, everyone was talking about it. Everybody was happy. And I'm not saying that has trailed off in any way, and I'm sure fandom's really gone back to their stinky mess. But yeah, it was good. It was a good feeling. You had, everyone just kind of, jumping in and basking in the glory of this return of Star Wars. So, or at least the Clone Wars. So I was pretty excited about it. And it's going to be a long wait because it's like next year, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like this is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 15-month wait, which is just killer. If that ends up being the killer. Case.
I mean, we got other stuff coming, so I guess it's okay. We'll probably, get our cups filled in a couple different ways. And the one thing I think I'll echo here on the show that I mentioned in Discord when this was announced was we're getting this 15 months out. That's a lot of time. And I really think we're still going to get more content coming, more announcements coming. We've got Celebration obviously coming up. I think we're probably going to get some announcements there, probably some big ones, and all of this. I guess we'll have to wait and see how much of this goes to the paid content subscription or service.
Right.
But again, we've said it on the show. They need to fill that up with something. They've got to make it worth your money to pay for, or worth your money. And this is a great start. Keep this momentum going. I think there are already people that have signed up just on this alone. Right. I'm one of them. So.
Well, and you make a good point about Celebration. This is going to make Celebration something really, really special and really fun, I think. You've got episode 9 next year, plus now you've got this. So, you've got an opportunity with everything else they've got going on. Hopefully Resistance is well received. And then whatever Favreau's got going on, you've got an opportunity to make April something really, really special and a lot of fun and really jam-packed with a lot of excitement and news.
But that's not the only thing that was released, right? We had a
huge publishing panel.
The publishing panel was insane. So there was a bunch of kids' books in here, and that, I don't want to dismiss those. It's just for the sake of time, we probably won't get into those. I think some of the standouts for me, the Poe Dameron comic ending on 31, which is a weird number for comics to end on. Or maybe that's my OCD just kicking in where why don't you just end it on 30 or 35, but whatever. That's coming to an end. They announced the Vader's Castle arc, which I don't know. It's got Hera and Kanan, so I'd be in all for that.
Well, there's a couple different ones, right?
Story, right?
Yeah, there's two different ones. There's the Star Wars Adventures, which is the Tales from Vader's Castle, which is by IDW. And that's this weird all-age horror-inspired stories that they're going to release throughout the month of October. And so that'll have your Kanan, Hera Chopper, Ewoks. I think there's a Kenobi Dooku one and Han and Chewie. But then you've got a different one for Marvel, which is part of the Vader comic series, which is a 7-part arc where they actually talk about how he, I guess, finds and acquires the castle or whatever that story looks like. So it's it was odd that they had two different Vader castles kind of stories, both by different teams, or I mean, different companies really. So, but and
you'd have to think that's intentional too, though.
Maybe, yeah. But the Tales from Vader's Castle is very niche, and they're hoping to make that something of a tradition where they have, I mean, one of the cool things about Halloween is you get all these really cool specials. And one of the ones I always remember was like the Simpsons Halloween special, right? So every year you get this really quirky, fun episode. And so this kind of reminds me of that, where you get kind of these wonky, fun episodes or a string of comics that you can do something different with but still be family friendly, but still a little scary.
Let's see, what else did we get? We had Queen's Shadow. So that was the Padme novel, which I think I posted about freaking time, because this is one of those ones that's just been talked about and talked about and talked about. And I don't know that there was ever any, fire behind it. It was just kind of always rumored. And I think it was expected. I think as fans, we wanted something here with her in novel form. So I'm glad we finally got to see that. I think E.K. Johnson's doing that. So she did a great job on the Ahsoka novel. So looking forward to that one. We had, what was the other one? The Apprentice.
Yeah,
Master and Apprentice.
Yep, by Claudia Gray.
Yeah. There was no, and maybe I missed it, but I think that was only a title only, right? We didn't see any artwork
right. It was just
a
black cover. I think the synopsis
was pretty.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is
we didn't get a whole lot of it.
Yeah, this is a Qui-Gon Obi-Wan pre-Phantom Menace mission. So this is really young Obi-Wan as well. So it's a little different take. So we'll actually see this dynamic. We've seen Obi-Wan and Anakin quite a bit. So this will be fun to see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and I'm being selfish in that I'm more excited about the fact that I'm going to get a lot of, hoping a lot more Qui-Gon, and just getting into his head and more about his beliefs and thoughts around the Force, because I got a pretty good feeling for what Obi-Wan thinks at this point, right, given all the stuff we've had. So that's I think the exciting part for me there.
No, I'm right with you. I think having a good Qui-Gon story, or something that he feels like more of the central character and Obi-Wan supports him, is a little different for us to take in. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
And then we got 3 Age of series, right? Age of Republic, Age of Rebellion, and Age of Resistance. And these are all comic books that are going to be coming out. So, and I don't know. I don't remember a whole lot here in terms of the announcement, other than I think they mentioned some of the characters that would be featured in these comics, but I don't think they and I could be wrong.
They
did
them releasing. Yeah, they did a little bit on Age of Republic. The other 2 they didn't do much with, but they're going to release 8 comics over 4 months, where you get 1 hero and 1 villain each month. And they did release the pairing. So you got Qui-Gon and Maul, Obi-Wan and Jango, Anakin and Dooku, and then Padme and Grievous. So we get a little more Padme as well. And each of those comics is central to that one character. So these aren't pairings or anything like that. At least there's no suggestion of that. And so presumably the Age of Rebellion and Age of Resistance will follow some sort of similar format as well. But yeah, we didn't get a lot of details beyond what those stories are going to be. We don't really get a lot of detail there yet. But the premise seemed to get people pretty excited as well. And again, now we kind of get it across all 3 timelines rather than zeroing in one particular space.
Right.
Also in the comic books, we're going to get a Star Wars story miniseries, which is...
And I heard we were going to get more stuff that wasn't in the movies in this
right.
one.
So we got, this is what happened with Last Jedi too, right? So there's going to be solo Star Wars story book, which Mur Lafferty is going to write. And it's going to get the similar treatment to Last Jedi. So you're going to get the film story, but you're also going to get alternate scenes, alternate versions of the script, additional comments. And they said specifically they're going to give you deeper insight into Han's years in the Imperial Navy, Kira's past, which we've been very interested in, and also the beginnings of the rebellion. So that seems to suggest maybe more Enfys Nest. And then the comic book will have a 5-issue miniseries that does a lot of those same types of things where they pick that up. And that's very much the formula that they did with Last Jedi. Last Jedi, they did the novel. And then right now, the Last Jedi comic series is coming out too. And those have actually been very well received because they're enhancing the story rather than just doing a straight retelling of the movie, which I think is another good opportunity for those formats to differentiate themselves from the movie and also build on the movie because you have opportunities to look inside characters' heads, just like the novels do, but with visuals. So I think I think those are good things. I think those are potentially, good stories to go and tell and pull up and invest in and invest your time in.
And beyond that, I think we had Women of the Galaxy. I saw more artwork there. It looks pretty darn good in terms of the art and all that. So still interested in that one. And if that wasn't enough, wait, there's more. Today we are recording on July 24th. So it is the official release of Thrawn Alliances, which I have picked up and I probably will begin reading on Thursday. There's no way I'm going to be able to do it in the next 2 days. Just because of other commitments like this show in the basement. But I think Thursday I'm going to hit that and try to get that done by the end of the weekend. So I'm pretty excited about that book. Have you had a chance to pick that up or are you going to be hitting that one soon?
Well, I've got it queued up in Audible, not audio. I just finished.
Who's doing the reading on that one?
Say that again?
Who's doing the reading of that on the audiobook? I believe it's
Mark Thompson.
Oh, okay.
He's pretty much everything these days. I'll have to check that. But if I say Mark Thompson, I feel confident I've got like a 90% chance I'm right.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. So I've got it queued up. Just finished Dark Disciple, which he did, which was amazing. So I'm really looking forward to it. And apparently I don't have to listen to the first Thrawn to listen to this one. And from what Becca was saying, this one's really a great story. And with Anakin there, it's probably going to be there's too much temptation there to not just jump right into this one and then go back and revisit the last one. I've got a couple of credits standing by, so I'm good. I'm going to get this. Right. But yeah, so I think Thrawn Alliances is definitely coming up next year. In the next few days, I'll start listening to that one.
Good deal. And then the very last thing, we've got Chewbacca had spinal surgery. So I think we had posted it on social media, but just all best, wishes and prayers to him and a speedy recovery there. But I did see that picture of him. I bet that's one humongous bed that they've got that gentleman in right now.
That is probably true. They may have had to stitch a couple together. But yeah, all the best to Peter Mayhew. This is helping improve his mobility, which of course has been a drag on him for a while now. So he seems excited and seems encouraged by the prognosis. So all the best to him and a speedy recovery. All
right, well, let's do this. We've got a lot to talk about here. And again, just to kind of recap, we've decided that we're going to take the Asajj Ventress character breakdown analysis. We'll take this up until Dark Disciple. And we'll kind of talk about that just for the sake of content and framing it. But and then part 2 will primarily be about Dark Disciple. There's a lot of stuff there that we could really get into, but we'll kind of condense that down as well. So before we get started, so having read Dark Disciple and looking back at all of the Asajj Ventress, episodes and content and all that stuff that we've got, put apart the Dark Horse stuff, move aside the Dark Horse stuff, the original Clone Wars stuff, get that out of there. But if you were just to go back and look at the canon stuff, what if you had to come up with words to describe Ventress, what are some of the words that just kind of come to mind immediately now?
One of the ones that continues to surface for me is ruthless. And we see this in every stage of her life, is that she is just ruthless. She is focused and just single-minded on the task, and whatever needs to happen to get that done, she will do it. And usually there's no doubt, there's no second guessing, and she just has supreme confidence that it'll work. Another word that surfaces, and I think this is largely due to the Clone Wars, is one of failure, which I think we're going to touch a little bit on later, of disappointment, right? And as we get through the conversation, we're going to have some other adjectives there too that I think describe her more emotionally, that you have to dig a little deeper to get to, but I don't want to spoil any of that quite yet. Is there something that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, there is, and I didn't mean to throw a curveball at you, but there was just as you know, as the listeners are kind of going through the show, I thought it'd be interesting to just kind of focus on some of these words, like you'd mentioned, right? The failures, we're going to talk about those, but resilience is another one, right? If I want to get into maybe some of the more positive aspects of her character, I felt like strong, brave, adept, capable, survivor, right? All of these
Fearless,
traits of hers. Fearless is another great one. They just keep you can see where these all play in, the good and the bad, in a lot of what we're about to talk about. And I also want to kind of point out one other common theme that I kind of noticed that it wasn't always apparent to me, I guess, from as I was kind of listening or watching these when they originally came out, but having gone back and just reviewed these and did for the show prep, there's this common theme where she's constantly struggling between, am I on my own or am I part of a team? And she seems to, at some points in her life, and she's going to wear a lot of different hats here, which we'll talk about, but it seems like there's so many points in her life where she's given an opportunity to be a part of something, right? Whether that's a team or a crew, friendship, kinship, whatever, sisterhood. And then there's other moments where, and she doesn't take that. There's a few moments where she does, with some rules, I guess, right? Maybe some, she tries to keep her distance a little bit there, but then there's other moments where she's really wants to be on her own. And it just seems like there's kind of this ebb and flow with her in terms of where she is and where her alliances are and who she keeps close to her, which really is a very, very short list, which we'll talk about here, in just a little bit. But, the other thing is, I mentioned it was just the roles, right? There's, if she goes from a slave to a Padawan to, a Sith assassin, a sister bounty hunter, you can throw in a whole lot of different words in there, but she's got a very, very interesting arc and evolution of her character that I think when we get to Dark Disciple, I think that's one of the things I really enjoyed about it. It does kind of, it has a great ending for her, almost a redemption arc, right? But to get there, she went through a lot of crap, right? So anyways, I just kind of want to maybe
I think
lay that down.
To wrap kind of what you're saying is really identity. She always seemed to struggle to find her true identity. And she was trying to get that through others. And you're right. By the time we got to the end of Dark Disciple, she finally realizes who she is, who she wants to be, and how she contributes and what her place is and everything. And so when you're right, when you start to see that total arc and you take the time, and we've had the luxury here of doing all of this in the last week or two, to be able to see that transformation was a lot of fun. And I'm really excited to kind of dig into each one of these phases and see that progression go. So
when we first get, let's start with her birth. She's kind of born into this, I guess, an environment of slavery, right? I mean, we don't know there's a threat that's mentioned. So there's this figure named Halstead, and Halstead is, the Night Sisters Mother Talzin gives, Assaj to Halstead because of a threat. And you're almost led to believe that because the baby was given up, sacrifice, whatever, I want sacrifice, that's not the right word, but given up, to Halstead, that, she saved the sisterhood. And I don't know, and maybe you came across this, but I kind of threw that question out there, but what was the threat that was so big? Because you got to think at that moment, the Night Sisters were probably in their prime. They probably had the highest number of Night Sisters. They certainly weren't where they were later down the road when we get to like Massacare and all of those episodes in Clone Wars. So there had to have been something pretty prominent that the Night Sisters felt like, hey, this is our only recourse, is to give up this child, in order to, again, subdue the threat. But did you come across that, or do you have any thoughts there about what that possibly could have been?
No, it's a tough question because we see part of was it because Mother Talzin was still young, or the environment that Halstead's from is on Rat Attack, right? And this planet, from what I've been able to gather, is one that is basically just torn apart by crime and pirates. And it's just this constant battle on this planet. And Halstead seems to be a bit of a warlord, criminal syndicate lead type of guy. But clearly their paths had crossed somewhere. And you're right, there was something that they owed them a favor, or they had to do something to pay them off. And this is a pretty steep price to pay for that type of thing. But no, I couldn't find anything that actually said this is what it was. This was the debt that they were paying. I mean, clearly it pained them because we got to see glimpses of this in the Clone Wars series, and we definitely got to hear a brief recap in Dark Disciple as well. But we just don't get that next layer of detail of like, why was that necessary? And it just seems like it was a kind of a debt, and whatever that debt was, this was the high price that they had to pay for it.
And we kind of get, and I think it's in Dark Disciple. Maybe it was, I forget now where, but she makes mention of the fact that she was, a slave at a very young age, but that
treated her well.
That Halstead was a kind master. Right. Almost like it almost alludes to the fact that he was a kind of like a father figure, right?
Right.
And so it's a little different than I think we typically get with these, the orphans in Star Wars, right? You can think of Anakin and how Watto treated him, although that was a little different. But there are plenty of other, orphans in Star Wars land that did not get treated very well. But I guess that was a surprising thing for me. You would think, given that she became, a Sith assassin or Sith, you can argue it both ways, but she came from this troubled childhood, but that really wasn't the case. So we know that Halstead was living, I think you'd mentioned on Ratatak, and he ended up being killed by the pirates. Yep. Yeah, the Weequay pirates that were constantly, and it seemed like these guys were constantly raiding this. The whole planet really was kind of full of warlords and worn torn, right? So it was not a very great environment. And then along comes this, Jedi, Kai Narek, who sees her, I think there's a scene in one of the episodes where we get the flashback. I think it's in Sisterhood or one of those episodes where we get to see Assaj, and she throws off some of the pirates using the Force. And that's when he notices that she's Force sensitive, and he takes it upon himself to go ahead and begin her training.
Right.
And so this relationship starts there, and we almost get the sense again that it is a kind of father-daughter relationship. But one of the things that was interesting to me is that they make mention that they were on Ratatak for over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I never got the sense that one, and I could be wrong, but I never got the sense that Narek even told the Jedi Council that he had taken on a Padawan. Maybe it was a formal thing. I don't know. But I got the sense that he was just there. And for the next 10 years, he decided, hey, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to bring her up and raise her and teach her the ways of the Force as a Jedi. But it didn't seem like they ever left. Right. And I don't know what the deal was or why, but they just felt like they were just stranded there for that 10-year period.
Right. And the only commentary we get on it is from Assaj, and we don't know if it's colored or not, because she says that the Jedi abandoned him there. And so when he's ultimately killed by, again, Weequay pirates, she lays that at the feet of the Jedi. And that began her descent. But yeah, you're right. They had this it seemed very father figures because she was still very young. So presumably she wasn't with Halstead, but just a few years. And so she was an apprentice to Kai Narek, who was a Jedi Knight at the time, wasn't a master, was a Jedi Knight for 10 years. So she was still, very much developing into a young woman. She was probably still an early to mid teenager is kind of the best I could put it, probably mid teenager whenever this happened. And to lose that again, you start to get this sense of loss that's starting to, you're getting close to a trend now. And for whatever reason, why the Jedi didn't come back, this is a disconnect too, because usually the Jedi don't abandon and leave them, especially if they know that they have someone alive. And so it was very unique that we get that perspective. And that was why it was difficult to trust. I mean, it's difficult to trust Asajj Ventress anyway, right? Because she constantly lies and bends things and manipulates them however she's fit. So we don't know if it's a complete truthful recollection of that. We also don't know if Narek was 100% honest about it either. Maybe he stayed of his own accord, but through her, rose or her, different lens of that, wasn't able to see that. She just saw it as, no, it was straight up abandonment. And so whenever he died in the same way that her previous one did, then all of this manifested itself, and the sheer hatred began of the Jedi, and these dark tendencies start surfacing, and you have no one there to help guide you anymore. And she became ruler. I mean, she kind of adopted the warlord mantle of sorts over the planet Ratatak.
Yeah, and then that's what caught Count Dooku's attention, right? So he knows that there's this we're going to say probably 13, 14-year-old girl at that point, maybe a little bit older. It just kind of really depends. I don't think we really get a good sense of time there. Right. But you have someone who has already gone through two huge changes in her life. She's already got trust issues that she's starting to develop. She's taken on the mantle, like you said, of the warlord. I think in the book, or I forget now where it was, but they make mention of the fact that she went and she kind of cleaned house. She took out all the warlords that were on Ratatak. She became that dominating warlord, kind of ran things the way she saw it.
In her words, she ruled Ratatak.
Yeah. And then, of course, Count Dooku comes along and decides to, he's the master of manipulation, and decides that he's going to take her as his apprentice. And that's kind of where we get into his relationship. So from this point now, we get into the Sith assassin kind of role. And one of the things you threw out there, I guess, is whether or not we got a sense of their relationship, and was it a fatherly relationship? I think my thoughts on her was I have a feeling she trusted him. And we know what Count Dooku does. We've seen it, what he did to like Savage, right? There was a moment there where he just kind of just laid into him for screwing up something. Or I think he had killed that king, the Toydarian king or whatever. Right. The point of that being is he was never really nice to his apprentices. And I have a feeling that this was a shock to her, right? I think she was probably starting to be consumed by the dark side and the power that it brought. And I think she probably looked at this as like, oh, okay, here's, Narc 2.0. And it really was probably not the case. I think he had faith in her, but I think it was a pretty abusive relationship, I guess, if you want to call it that. It certainly didn't seem like it would be a healthy relationship, not with that nutcase. But did you get anything else that you felt like it was, or I guess in the way of a fatherly type relationship with his daughter, or do you think there was something else there?
I think this is more about perspective. So for him, it was very much, I think, apprenticeship. And we'll get into, was it really an apprenticeship or not here in a second. But I think for her, and something we've seen with her is that she's constantly trying to please. She's constantly trying to prove her worth and her value, which quite honestly isn't that much different than what we do as children with our parents. Mm-hmm. And we constantly, and we need that validation that we're doing well. And when we disappoint, it pains us physically. And we see Ventress reference this often of the pain of the dark side is physical as much as it is spiritual. It is so, it's so intense spiritually that it actually pains you physically, which manifests itself further in the dark side, right? So it's this weird cyclical, nasty circle that you're in. So I think he had a soft spot for her. And we saw that in some of the Clone War episodes where when Palpatine ordered him to kill her, he had hesitation. He couldn't show it with Sidious, but he had that hesitation to it. So there was clearly some other, emotional attachment, I think, that he had to her that maybe we didn't see. And some of it I'm trying to disassociate with just his calm and his very, fatherly type of demeanor. He's very well put together, very well spoken, very suave and svelte, and has this great, just presence about him that just seems very, very regally fatherly to you. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to disassociate with that to see if there was actually something there. And I don't necessarily see fatherly tendencies, but there were a few times where it's like, okay, you could draw some conclusions there. But I think definitely for her, I believe it was another mentor at the very least. But in this case, it could have been, a replacement for Narek, just an albeit more abusive one.
And to me, I don't, for Dooku, I get the sense that, and I know what you're talking about, because when Palpatine asked him to go ahead and take her out, because I don't want to jump ahead here, but he mentions that, her power is starting to grow, and, he's enforcing the rule of two, for lack of a better term there. He is taken back by that. Like, hey, wait a second, what are you talking about? And it was almost kind of like a challenge to Dooku to prove your worth and prove yourself to me by go ahead and taking her out. I almost got I got the sense that he was more taken back by the fact that his tool, or his, one of the tools in rise to power and at some point taking Palpatine out was suddenly going to be eliminated because Palpatine asked him to do it. So I don't know that it was really the sense of loss of like a relationship type thing, other than, and maybe more of like, hey, this is a kind of a huge setback in my plan. You're removing one of the legs, of this table, and I'm not sure exactly if this is the right thing to do. I think it was probably just more taken back by the fact that things were going to change.
Well, I think
more than his feelings.
I think he really trusted her too.
Similar, he did, and there's a couple episodes.
Yeah, and I think he trusts Grievous too.
He did, and I think there's signs of that in. I don't have the episodes directly, but they're out there. He's almost making a case for her, especially when you go to like the Clone Wars movie, right? He's making a case of like, hey, yeah, she's kind of had some setbacks, but trust me on this one, she's gonna come through for us on this. And so there's times when he does make that case for her.
Right.
I think he probably has some crazy weird feelings for her. But it's hard with the dark side. It's hard to really, and we'll get to this with Dark Disciple, especially.
Right.
It's hard to know where these guys' heads at and what's legitimate and what's real and what's not, and what's just, the passion that comes from the dark side and that lust for power. It all kind of gets blurred at times.
One thing I thought was interesting with all that, though, is that they constantly only refer to her as an assassin. He cannot refer to her as an apprentice because of, like you said before, the rule of two. It is steadfast, even with everything we've seen in Rebels and everything else. They always have some other word for them besides apprentice for the one that secretly has an apprentice. So there's always some way of putting it. And so she was the assassin, even though clearly she is much more than an assassin.
Absolutely. And I put in the show notes because I think at some point, if we do get into the Quinlan Vos, this is almost
it's exactly
right out of that book, right? Where, there's that towards the very end where he says that, hey, basically calls up Palpatine and starts talking, and he introduces him as his assassin. And up until that point, Quinlan Vos is thinking, hey, I am his apprentice. He calls me his apprentice and that sort of thing. And so he's really offended by the fact that when he hangs up the phone, he tells him, he's like, hey, dude, what's going on? You said, why did you call me your assassin, not your apprentice? Because, he'd be breaking that rule of two, and Dooku's not going to put himself in that position. So there is some echoing there, some parallels that kind of run with it. And it maybe just speaks to the fact that, he's doing these things and doesn't want, he being Dooku doesn't want Palpatine to know what his, ultimate plans are. But given what we know about Sidious, he knows all that already.
Well, and even though I think Dooku and Assaj had that same plan, she at least knew and acknowledged and understood what they had to portray themselves as in order to achieve that final goal. So I think some of that's like, where are you at? She came into it and she knew exactly what she was doing, but she'd been fed those same promises, even though they didn't seem to be really, going anywhere. But
it's a great point, actually. The other stuff that's kind of going on here, we probably should make mention of this because it's going to set up some things later on, probably in the next episode. But when we talk about, Jedi Master Thome, right? So Jedi Master Thome was Quinlan Vos's Jedi Master, and we know that he fell at the hands of Asajj Ventress. And there's one question that I threw out there because Dooku, when he asks Assaj to go out there, he explicitly says, don't kill him. And yet she still does it. And I don't know that we get a real good reason as to why. Maybe it's the Force working in mysterious ways, and this was part of a grander plan here. But any thoughts there around why she went against that order of not killing Thome?
Did we actually see where was it his telling of the story that said he told her not to do it? Because I just never trust Dooku for anything. He's like you say, he's the master of manipulation.
Yeah, I think it's in the novel. If not, I think it's in one of the encyclopedias that they make.
They definitely talked about it in Dark Disciple, but to me, I couldn't tell if he was manipulating the conversation again. But for argument's sake, let's just say that he actually told her not to do it. I think it's still just one of these, I'm going to prove to you, she has the hatred of the Jedi, and it doesn't matter who they are. Taking them alive is not her primary concern. Like, she wants revenge. She will do everything they have. And plus, she wants to prove her worth. And I think it's that latter part that's the main driver, is that she needs, especially after, if you've had setbacks, you need to say, here's a clear win. And I did it. why would we keep them alive? They serve us no purpose to keep them alive. Even, I mean, you can't even argue with the turning them, because then that's a threat. So to me, it's just, you got to continue to prove your worth. And she has a vendetta. Every single one of them are in her crosshairs, and she'll put every single one of them down if she has the opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you there. I mean, this seems like it's early on in her career, right? She's the up and coming. There's probably a lot of pressure on her to perform, and again, like you mentioned earlier, she's probably wanting to appease him in a lot of different ways, and then probably just test herself, right? She's got this newfound power, this newfound glory, newfound purpose, and here she's got a Jedi Master in Thome, and she's got an opportunity, just test the waters kind of thing. So it could be, you can chalk it up just to pure innocence and making stupid decisions when you've been told not to do something. But I think it's definitely a critical moment and a milestone, because again, this is all going to play into some of the stuff that we'll get into. Probably we will in the next episode.
I think generally too, we don't know that she has always had her eyes on the big picture. So it's something that she seems very focused on the here and now, the moment aspect of it, but maybe not necessarily what all needs to happen to accomplish the overall goal.
There's another interesting aspect that we get and it's almost funny at times, but this whole competition with Grievous, like there's a lot of episodes where they're just going back and forth, and they're almost like trying to one up one another at times, and you get the sense that, much like we're kind of seeing with the Thrawn Alliance's novel, at least what they're kind of alluding to is you've got these two right-hand people, right, in like maybe in Vader and Thrawn, who are trying to appease Sidious. We get that sense that Grievous and Ventress are in that same kind of role. They're both going on different missions. They're both trying to, make a case for why they should be, the favored one. We could even go back to more recently with like Snoke and Kylo Ren and Hux, right? They've got they're kind of just in this constant competition. So it seems like it's a theme that's repeated itself, and there's probably plenty of other examples where we see that in Star Wars. But was this something that you focused on when you originally watched the episodes, or is this just something that came up in the course of the research here?
No, yeah, you get this impression as they go on. Any of the time that they cross paths, they're definitely a little at odds with one another, and then she'll make little comments every once in a while, like, "General, there's nothing that you have that I could possibly want." But what was interesting is earlier today, actually, you told me to go rewatch Rookies, which is, I think, one of your favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. And again, they had a lot of the quotes in the Clone Wars trailer from that episode as well. But I went back and watched it, and Ventress is only in a very, very short clip of it, but she is calling him my lord. This is like, season 1, like episode 4 or 5. It's really, really early. And she's calling him my lord, and she is very subservient. So they're in the food chain, she appears to be below him, and that, he is her general. And so it was very different, but you also see the seeds of that, right? So she set the stage for a Camino invasion. Everything was set, and then Grievous didn't deliver on Rishi. And so you can see where that tension could start to mount from there, where if one or the other isn't doing their part, then they're quickly going to be like, okay, what do I have to do? Because you're not helping me do it. And, you're in my way now. You're working against my goals. And so, so it was curious to go back and watch that after seeing some of the episodes where they had the banter. And so it was a good call on your part to, even with that brief thing. And I was like, she's not in any of this. And then the more I saw it, I'm like, I could see where this is where this could build over time.
Right. And we're going to actually kind of touch on some of these failures here in just a minute, one right after another. But this is one of those things where she doesn't really have a lot of these wins, at least from what we know. I'm sure there's many battles that we are not privy to because of they were never done in the Clone Wars. But just on the surface, and we look at the episodes themselves, there's a lot of failures here. What? And one of the very few wins that she has is that particular one, and the fact that Grievous doesn't deliver. Right, they're almost both guilty for not having delivered. So she's got to be thinking to herself, "I can't get a break around here." Right, I do what I'm supposed to do. I finally get a feather in my cap, and I got Bozo over here who blows the whole thing. And now we got to go report to Dooku, and he's going to kind of look at this holistically and say, "Hey, it's just another failure for Ventress." And
you look at the odds that she's usually up against, which are pretty incredible. that one person is going up against. So we'll get to that here in a minute, but it's pretty incredible that one person is stacking up against all these scenarios.
So let's talk about her she makes a comment, and I think we get this from
really in the novel. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dark Disciple, there's a moment there where her and Quinlan Voss are kind of talking, and she's kind of going through her repertoire of things that she does in order to, collect bounties and manipulate people and you do the espionage, undercover, dark stuff kind of things. And she mentions that she, at times she will use, quote, all the tools in her kit. And we kind of saw some of this early on, especially with Kenobi, where there's almost like this flirting that's going on. And it's very interesting because growing up, that was just something that was, I never, even before I guess even with the movies, right? With the original trilogy, you got the sense that they were celibate. They didn't even cross that line ever. And then in the Clone Wars, you get not only with, obviously with Asajj, but there's plenty of other ladies that we see Kenobi kind of flirting with. And it was almost like, I don't know, it was almost like you didn't expect it to happen. And you get more confirmation that this is just a common thing. And it's probably ignorance on my part, but you get more confirmation later on in Dark Disciple. I think there's a moment in there where he's kind of talking to Quinlan Voss, and he says that, hey, yeah, sometimes you do have to flirt, but we still keep that shield up. We keep that wall up, that barrier, so that we don't allow our feelings to really get, or our feelings and emotions to kind of get in the way of the mission.
Exactly.
And of the order. But yeah, we do get this between her, and for her, we know sometimes it's maybe a little bit more. She seems to be okay with it. She's well within her comfort zone when she's doing it. But any thoughts around that? And I can't recall how many episodes we see this with her where she does it. There's a really gruesome one later that we'll probably talk about, but where she's, kissing someone as she impales him. But what other, I guess with the flirtation with Kenobi, did it ever be jarring for you in any way?
It was very different. Like, I think Kenobi called her my sweet at one point in one of their more overt flirting matches. But I think some of it also goes back to Kenobi really did respect her ability. She was in just her strength and her presence and her just raw ability, even though he completely disagreed fundamentally with how she did things or why she did things and what she was doing. But I think there was a bit of that respect there. And he always had some semblance that there was something else there. And I was curious, though, of whether or not this could have ever transpired into something, because they do have this kind of odd compatibility, which is really weird to say, but I can almost see them, that they could have a relationship in a different life, a different world type of thing. And I think Kenobi even hints as much in Dark Disciple, where he kind of flirts with that edge. Like, she's very attractive and she has a lot of ability and she's a very, strong. I mean, these are obviously qualities that he values in a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think talking about their complementing one another in at least their techniques. There's a great Clone Wars battle between, Asajj Ventress, Darth Maul, Kenobi, and Ventress, and it's Kenobi and Ventress fighting those two. It's a really great choreographed battle, but they really, it almost like it probably is. They intentionally try to showcase the fact that they complement one another. So it's just almost like a relationship that is there, but never really can be there. But we definitely get glimpses of that. The reason we brought up all the tools in the kit, because there are moments where Asajj Ventress convinces people to kind of churn. Primarily, I think the biggest one is Sergeant Slick, and I'm not going to recall the episode right now. But there's a scene in there where one of the clones, the sergeant of that group, suddenly decides that he's going to be a turncoat, and it's because Asajj just kind of convinced him. And you got to wonder how much of that, or how much of her tools in her kit, so to speak, did she use for that one, or even later on. There's the scene where Newt Gunray is like a prisoner, and they get one of the royal guards to kind of be a turncoat as well, and you get the sense that, well, you do. Asajj is behind all of this as well,
right?
But yeah, you got to wonder, you got to think that she is probably using seduction, sex, whatever she can, to kind of help turn the tides and get these guys to kind of switch sides whenever she needs them to. So again, it's just another. She's just another example of her resourcefulness and doing whatever she needs to do to kind of get the job done. So let's talk about the failures. And I think we've went down the path of just saying, let's talk about, some of these little battles and how they turned out. It just ended up being objective/failures because a lot of these are really failures. So we had a series of them. We had Road to the Hutt, right? So this is from the Clone Wars movie. And the whole idea here was that they were trying to prevent Skywalker and Ahsoka from taking the baby off the planet, and she failed at that one. There's the very first episode, which I think is Ambush,
right?
From the Clone Wars,
yep.
With King
Katunko.
Was it Katunko? Who later dies, poor guy. But yeah, I mean, there's that episode where all she had to do was take out Yoda, and that's a big.
I think really all she had to do was delay him to where he didn't make the target. It was kind of a weird deal, anyway. I don't know why you'd ever. It was her arrogance kind of getting through on that one.
Yep, but that was another failure, and that was really neat too, because even at the very end of it, one of the scenes that always stuck out or I guess one of the moments in that particular episode is at the very end. She decides, screw it, I've already lost. I'm gonna go ahead and kill this guy, and so she pulls out her sword, her lightsaber.
Oh yeah!
Just as about she's to do him in, Yoda just completely stops her, disarms her, and then gives her lightsabers back, all within a span of seconds. And it's a very cool showcase of Yoda's power, but it's very humbling. You can tell she's embarrassed by it, by the fact that this little green guy just came in and stood in. But anyways, that scene always just stuck with me. And
that was such a great Yoda episode in general. Like when they're in the cave with the 3 clones and he has them remove their helmet. It's a great episode. It's certainly one of those must-watch ones. And
especially the battle itself, where it's like him taking on the entire platoon.
It's great.
All right. So yeah, it was good stuff. And then we go to the Rookies episode. So we talked about the Kamino base. And again, she was successful, but Grievous didn't come through. So, that's considered a loss, I guess. Here's a win. We mentioned Newt Gunray. She was supposed to rescue him because he was a prisoner. She actually got him, rescued him. And this is one of those first scenes where you get this sense of you're starting, at least for me, this is where I was really starting to like her character a lot. Like, oh, she's really deep and there's a lot of complexity here. And then she just cold blood murders Captain Argus, right? And you realize that it's an eye opener because, hey, just prior to that, this guy's boasting about, hey, I did it. I'm going to let Dooku know and all that stuff. And you can see it in her eyes in that episode. She's starting to realize, well, this guy's going to take all my glory. And again, we're going back to this where she almost feels like I've got to prove my worth. And so what better way to ensure that there's only one message that's given to Dooku? She does him in, ignites that lightsaber in cold blood right through the seat, right through his chest. And you can see his expression on his face. It's a really cold, dark moment in Clone Wars. And there's a few other ones like that with her, especially. Right. But this is where there's one of the few moments, I think, for me where we got to see the assassin, right? And then we got the last one was the Back to Kamino. So there was one of the episodes where they were trying to retrieve Jango Fett's DNA template, and it doesn't work out. We won't get into all the details, but again, it was another failure. And this is that one I was mentioning earlier with Commander Colt, where she, I think she's force choking him up against the wall, and then she force pulls him into her lightsaber as it goes through his chest, and then she, as holding the lightsaber still ignited while this guy is bleeding out, she leans in and gives him a kiss before she turns the lightsaber
that one
off.
was one of the coldest ones. The Argus one really caught me off guard too the first time I saw it, just that they went there, but it was so appropriate. This one was just like the sheer pleasure of it, which really was cold. I mean, really, really cold.
And she did that in front of Grievous. Wasn't Grievous in that hallway as well with her?
I can't remember.
I think he was, maybe not. I was going to say that maybe this is another moment where it wasn't so much about her wanting to do it because she, enjoyed it, but more of making a statement to Grievous in a way of saying, showing her power kind of thing. I don't know. We'll have to go back and look at that, but I guess that could be another motive there why she would do that. And that really kind of brings to the end of the Sith relationship, because just shortly after that, we get into the Battle of Sullust, And this is where we talk about Dooku getting word from Sidious and basically Sidious saying, hey, she's becoming too powerful, which you got to kind of wonder because there's been a series of failures here. And again, we don't have the whole story and I'm sure there's more to it, that kind of thing, but we don't really get it. I never really got the sense that she was really, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's powerful, but was she really imposing at that point? Was she becoming a threat to Sidious, or was this just Sidious games, or was this a Sidious game here in getting Dooku to kill her?
I think he was right. She was getting powerful. If we see the battle, especially if we go to the Nuke Gunray rescue mission, she's taken on Luminar Unduli and Ahsoka Tano at the same time, and holding her own, and actually winning a lot of that fight against a Jedi Master. And so this was the question I had was, if Ventress were a Jedi in the classification pool, where would she actually be? Would she be Padawan Knight or a Master? I've got an opinion, but I want to hear yours first.
I'm going to screw this up.
No, I mean, there's not a wrong answer. It's because I think there's arguments for and against. Because clearly she's not a Padawan, right? She's way too advanced for that. So it's more of, is she a Knight or is she a Master? And I think there's arguments for both.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to have to say a Knight, and only because I don't think, at least into this, and maybe at the very end, I think you have a stronger argument to say she's a Master. But I think one of the things, and we've kind of talked about this in this episode already, I just never felt like she really had the wisdom that I would expect, right? Dooku is very wise. Sidious is very wise. You think about the Jedi Masters themselves, and you can make arguments against this, trust me. But for the most part, I think there's a level of wisdom and maturity that comes there before that title is bestowed upon you as Master. And I just never got the sense that she was there. She just seemed like she was really raw power, raw talent, much like Anakin in a lot of ways.
Yep.
But not necessarily, but always lacking that level of the next level of maturity or wisdom that probably you would need to have in order to be considered a Master. So final answer is Knight.
Okay. And I very much equated her to Anakin.
Did I win?
That's more or less right. I think, we had Anakin as Master in title, but not in seat. And I think she very much fits that same type of bill. When you look at abilities, you really can't question that. She's a master at her craft, and she's a master at a variety of ability and craft of what she can deliver and what she can bring to the table. But you're right, that maturity and the wisdom aspect of it, I think, are really good points. And that kind of drags her back, and you can see, but she's on this cusp where she's really on, just like Anakin. She has the credentials to be a master, but there's things holding her back. But anyway, I was just curious because when you talk about, is she powerful enough to be concerned about, Sidious is doing two things. One, she might not be too powerful now, but you snuff that out before she is. And then two, very much a test of Dooku and his commitment and his resolve and dedication to Palpatine, or to Sidious rather. Because if Sidious isn't stupid, he knows how the Sith work. He knows that if he's raising not an assassin, but an apprentice, then the only thing that they could be plotting is to be plotting against him. And so what better way to prove your worthiness or your dedication is to, let's take that out. You don't get to keep that toy anymore. Prove to me that she's just a toy thing, that she's just another tool in your tool belt, Count Dooku. And he, to his credit, while he had some initial reservations, it looked like he didn't hesitate.
Yeah, I mean, he could have probably been thorough about it, but it's Clone Wars. So yeah, and we're kind of just from a timeline perspective, we're sitting around. This is the Night Sisters episode, where he gives Dooku gives the order. All of the droids. I think she's in the middle of a battle with Kenobi, if I'm not mistaken, and they pretty much all turn on her and start firing, and they pretty much leave her for dead. They retreat, and she ends up getting picked up by a bunch of junkers, or I guess a salvage crew. I mean, she's sitting in the cockpit of that particular ship that she got away in, but
she's a survivor, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, just floating out there in space, unconscious, and someone finds her, and immediately, she kills all of them. That's one of her, I think, all 5 of those guys that pick her up. She just murders all of them. And then she ends up flying that ship out back to Dathomir. And this is where in that same episode that we get the flashbacks, and she has 3 of them basically. So after she gets there with Mother Talzin, they kind of put her through the metamorphosis change. And I never really got a good understanding of what was occurring there, right? Because she was laying down. There was all this green magic that was kind of floating around and stuff. And you got the sense that, okay, she's going through some kind of a ritual, but I never really, and maybe I missed it. I never understood
she didn't. And the book helped a little bit. This was more of it was a kind of rebirth or healing, if you will, like resurrection almost. But her true metamorphosis and acceptance into the clan didn't happen until a little bit later, right before the massacre. But yeah, you're right. It was confusing because this seemed like it would have been a good opportunity too, but then she was basically on her deathbed effectively. So they more or less saved her life, but she didn't fully commit back to the sisterhood and become one of the Night Sisters yet.
Yeah, you're right. I'm conflating the two.
Yeah, it's really easy to merge them, and they weren't that far apart either.
Right. But it's on there. I guess it's on her deathbed as they're healing her that we get the flashbacks.
Right.
And there's I think a series of 4 of them where, we get to see her being given up by the clan. The second flashback is her master is being killed there. And then she's, I forget his name. What's his face?
Narek.
I already forgot his name. No. Halstead.
Halstead.
Sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah. So we get to see that one where he gets killed. The next one is, then we get to see Narek training her as a Jedi Padawan, which is kind of cool. And then the last one we get to see is Narek being shot by the Weequay pirate. So, and then from there, she's kind of with the sisters, right? She's now not technically a Night Sister, but she's at least back amongst them.
Right.
Getting, feeling her, her roots and getting to know her culture that she never really got to be a part of. And they just accepted her right in, which, I wouldn't expect them not to.
But the thing was, she didn't really accept it all the way because she had this renewed focus, but it was solely on revenge, which we come to find out later. The Night Sisters really, they had a vendetta against Dooku as well, Mother Talzin. But at the same time, that wasn't really what they preached. They didn't really adhere to the Sith way of the dark side. The Sith way of the dark side was another, manipulation of something that to them was more pure than I don't even know what the right adjective is for it, but this mashing of it together and this crumpled ball. Wow, my words are terrible tonight.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it just didn't. It wasn't pure of how they viewed it as, and so she had this sense of revenge, which led to another assassination attempt, which of course failed. Yeah. And that leads to Dooku. Dooku's gonna, hey, I'm done with this. Mother Talzin, everybody. I mean, the whole Savage Opress thing has happened in between, in that betrayal there. So now we're going to where, Dooku is just going to go and wipe them all out.
Yep, and there's more that happens there. There's a couple of episodes, at least in season 3, where she is among the Night Sisters, but she's not really. It's not really so much about her. There's certain things that are happening, and she's being tasked with going out and trying to find, this new assassin that Talzin wants to put together as part of this, elaborate plan to take out Dooku. But really, the focus kind of turns on Savage Opress and all of that. There's some cool moments in there where she heads over to the male Zabrix, and they're referring to her as the witch, and she has that little the trial where she's trying to eliminate these guys literally to figure out which one's going to step in. But again, a lot of what we get here with her at least being back on Dathomir is more about prepping Savage Opress, or getting him ready to go out and assassinate Dooku. And when that fails, Dooku immediately, gets his revenge and sends an all-out attack. He contacts General Grievous. They head down to Dathomir with a crap ton of droids and pretty much start genocide. I mean, they wipe out. And this is the same day that this is where she is brought into the sisterhood.
Right.
And she's got a new kind of, purpose and all of that. And that same day, everybody is wiped out with the exception, I think, her and Talzin, who gets away. Even old Daka, poor thing. It's pretty much wipes them out, and this begins her next kind of stage in life. So she goes from being, a Night Sister to a bounty hunter. But she also rejects the Sith. And I guess we probably should mention that, right?
That was
This
the
is
irony.
a big moment.
That was the irony of her acceptance into the sisterhood. Her dedication to it was rejecting the Sith way and coming back to her roots. And so the irony is, as soon as she does that, that old life comes back and completely obliterates your new one. Mm-hmm. And we got glimpses of this in the novel where the cultural aspect of that really deeply pained her, to where she had just got back with family and they hadn't been able to teach her much of anything of where she came from or what to do when her sisters die, because it was very ritualistic of what they would do with the bodies. And it was all lost. There's no one left in order to teach that to other different generations or to the next generations, because Mother Talzin always says we always survive. Somehow they're going to survive, and we know Mother Talzin is out there. So somehow the Night Sisters will continue. But it was just the pain of, this whole culture is extinct effectively, at least in her eyes at that moment. And it was all after she left that life behind and she was ready to let Dooku go.
That's right. And I think Talzin did die. Talzin.
Did you finally?
And the son of Dathomir. Sorry. Spoiler alert there, but yeah.
Like I said, I got some comics to read.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I don't, and that's it. Just kind of honestly, I started thinking about. I can't remember who was the last surviving sister. Was it Ventress or was it Talzin? But it's really not point of the show. We'll figure that later. But anyways, so at this point. And one thing that we did, you had in the notes here was the loss of culture, and we were kind of talking about this before we came on the air, but and I'm with you here. When you get to Dark Disciple and they're kind of talking about Dathomir, especially when they get to that planet, I don't want to ruin that just now, but having gone back and looked at these episodes and having read the novel, because obviously the novel came out later, it was a really different experience, and you almost appreciate the world of Dathomir itself and the kind of a perverse beauty, I guess, if you want to call it that, of it as well. So let's get into the bounty hunter phase. So she has lost the sisterhood, and she's kind of gone down this path now of becoming basically a bounty hunter.
Well, she's lost. She's kind of lost for a while. She stumbles into the bounty hunter routine because she accidentally kills one of Boba's teams for making an inappropriate I don't know, comment, proposal, indecent proposal. So yeah, she was lost. She didn't know what she was going to do. And this kind of goes back to like this lack of identity. Every time she thinks she has one, it somehow eludes her. And she kind of happens into the next one and the next one, but it's not really her. So, but this lifestyle, hey, it fits her skill set. So it makes a lot of sense. So she teams up with Boba.
Yeah. And then this is kind of playing into, because Mother Talzin tells her that, hey, she kind of foretells that a new life is coming, and you get the sense that this is where they're kind of tying those two together. And so she gets hooked up with like Boba Fett, Bosk, Dengar is there again. Just these oddballs of bounty hunters. And this is the one with is this the train heist mission?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember now.
They go to Korzite.
Yeah, and there's a this is again, and you put it in here. Is this where the transition begins? And yeah, this is definitely where this new chapter of her life kind of picks up. I never got, and it almost seems like she's definitely, at least in my opinion, she doesn't seem as ruthless, right, as she was in a lot of the other episodes. There's almost like an edge that's been removed off of her. Not to say that she's not any less threatening. But you almost get the sense that that level of maturity that we were talking about, she almost kind of carries that, at least for me, in these bounty hunter episodes, all the way up until, we get to, the Catch a Jedi and the Wrong Jedi, where, those are the episodes where Tano is accused of the bombing, and
I think
she ends up leaving the order.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the edges are dulling. They're not quite as sharp as they were. And it was really abrupt when she lets the child go. So they find a child in the trunk, and instead of turning the child over to the crime syndicate, she returns. I think they're still on a mission to recover the Pike leader's family, right? And so she ends up putting Boba in the trunk instead. Spoiler alert. But
Mm-hmm.
But she, the interaction she has with the brother and the sister was that, she would never understand being taken away from your family. And those things really, something finally reached her in that moment. And we saw a very different, she kind of did it in her own way, but we saw a very different reaction where in the past she would have just said, nope, not my problem. And she tried that, but something inside her wouldn't let her quite do that. And so it seemed, it wasn't even really that abrupt because like you had said, something wasn't right with her anyway. It felt there was something different already with her when she took that mission, when she was in that bar. She was entertaining the idea of working with other people. And some of that was for money. She needed money, which is a pretty good motivator as well. And they were a pretty good team. But in that moment, she made that decision all on her own to do that.
And speaking of so in that episode, there is a box, right, that's being delivered to this creepy looking guy. It's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen in Clone Wars.
Yeah. Child bride. That was weird.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. I hate to say pedophile, but that's the sense I got. It was like this little sick guy had this little girl, and we're spoiling the episode, of course, because you're meant to think that in this box is some kind of credits or jewels or whatever, some artifact of some type, right? And it turns out that it's basically a young girl, and this guy's paid a lot of money for this particular bride and all of that. And I think in that moment when the box is open and she realizes that it's a little girl, I think for her the reality, or I guess what clicks, is, hey, that's me, right? I was that child at some point. I was given up to slavery. I was, I never got to kind of direct my own life. Everything was just kind of, we've already kind of talked about all this, but there was a lot of things that just happened to her, a lot of setbacks in her life. And I think she saw that in that moment that, hey, that this is another person that's going through what I did. I'm not going to allow this to happen. And so we almost get this humanitarian or human aspect of her that we hadn't really seen before. And again, it's kind of speaking to what we mentioned earlier about the edges kind of come off a little bit. And I think this is super important because when we get into Dark Disciple, you get this, you have to think that if this whole plot to kill Dooku and for her to allow somebody like Quinlan Vos to come into her life and be a team or be a part of it, I don't think for 1 second she would have allowed any of that to happen had this not been at this moment in her life, right? If you go back to whether she was with the Sisterhood or back during the Clone Wars, and you could argue that there's certain things hadn't happened yet, but I just don't see her character arc there, her mindset and being acceptable and understanding and all of that didn't happen. If all that had to, it could only have happened in this moment, right? At this point in her life, would she have allowed somebody like Quinlan Vos to come into her life and kind of just talk to her the way she did, be persistent in the way she did? Like, there's moments in there, and I'm jumping ahead there, but there's moments in there where like you almost you start to think she's going to cut this dude's head off, right? Because he's being so annoying. Why does she allow this to happen, knowing what we know about her? And when you look at holistically, when you go back and look at her natural evolution of her character, by the time we get to here, yeah, she's a little bit more mature here. She's a little bit more understanding. Again, that edge is gone, that kind of thing. So it all makes sense, as I guess is where I was going with that.
I agree. And we see that. I think the real change happened when she made the choice and there was a group, the Night Sisters, welcoming her home with open arms. And she's actually welcome and wanted. And that filled that gap, that void in her life, which we see. I mean, we see it with Jedi too, right? That they want and need these things, but they deny themselves in different ways. And so when she had this opportunity, she made the right decision. And we see that again when Ahsoka's on the run. And they it was interesting that Ahsoka had a strange quote. I have to admit, I never saw us doing anything together ever. And Assaj says, these are strange times. Yeah, and it was such a classic. And the delivery by, I believe her name is Nika Futterman. It was just perfect. I mean, again, fantastic voice actress for Ventress. She was amazing the entire series. But we saw that with Ahsoka too, right? Where you have, she was able to relate and she was able to open herself up just enough to relate with someone else that was having a similar experience with her. Because you're right. Otherwise, with Ahsoka, when she's on the run, she's just going to collect that bounty and be done with it.
Yep. And there's so if we could, we'll probably end it here. But going back to that whole the arc between To Catch a Jedi and The Wrong Jedi, there's a lot of great moments in there. One of the standouts, and she's a pivotal part. She has a pivotal part in that she's the one that ultimately gives up. Is it
Barasafi?
Who is it? Barasafi. Right. She's the one that gives her up to Anakin, and that's what leads Anakin to find her and exonerate Ahsoka. But there's a lot of great moments in there, and one in particular is when Ahsoka and Ventress are kind of they're talking. Ahsoka tells her, "Hey, I know he betrayed you," meaning Count Dooku, and she says, "I've fallen from my path just as you have." And so there's this moment where they're you almost get a sense that their lives are have kind of been running in parallel. Some of the same things have happened to one that have happened to the other, and she's almost connecting with her on that level. Right. And again, it just speaks to again her character development and the maturity here. I don't think she would have had that conversation with Ahsoka Tano, any earlier than this in her life. But there's also a moment in there where Ahsoka challenges her not to kill any of the clone troopers when they're cornered. And, Assaj goes off and cuts all the lightsaber or the blaster ends off and
knocks him out.
Does a lot of martial arts and and she doesn't kill a single one of them. And she's like, "See, right? Didn't kill one. It's the quote new me," is what she says to her as they're running off. So again, it just speaks to that level of development and where she is at this point. But the last thing, I guess we'll just kind of end it here. And I threw this out there in terms of she almost seems like this anti Ahsoka Tano character,
right?
And there are not a whole lot of similarities, but there are some very interesting parallels that in one that they were both brought into this Force order, whether it's the Jedi or the Sith, very early on in their age. Both of them left the order. If we go back and just look at it, Assaj was kind of forced out of it, and you could argue that Ahsoka was given the opportunity to come back, but she left on her own accord. So they're kind of fallen from those orders, so to speak. They both left, or at least thought they were leaving the Clone Wars, and ultimately the Clone Wars just catch up to them. It's like they try to get away from it, but they couldn't, right? It was part of their destiny. It was going to come back and haunt them and bring them back into it. And this is where, in that last episode, where I think it's Ahsoka that says that, "Hey, we both have masters that abandoned us." Oh no, I'm sorry. I think it's Ventress talking to Skywalker.
Right.
She tells them that, "Hey,
you abandoned her.
I know what it feels like to be abandoned. You just abandoned your apprentices as well." Right. So it's very interesting and I don't know if that was always intentional. It probably was, knowing Filoni. But it is a very unique parallel, I think, with regards to those two characters.
I just like that we in the end of the Clone Wars, and we see it in the book as well, that she's the one showing the Jedi like the error of their ways.
Oh,
and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the coming shows. But it's just this delightful irony that someone so cruel and that has done so many things wrong and so many things to the Jedi, and because of the Jedi, that now she is the one that says, "No, you guys are part of the problem." And so, and highlighting to them, this is how you're treating Ahsoka. This is how you have completely abandoned her in her time of need, when really you should be supporting her and you should be finding a way to help her rather than just jumping to whatever conclusion that they've made, and all the good deeds you've done just don't matter. And whereas she's constantly having to fight that she's not the sum of all of her bad deeds, and that there is something, redeemable in there, not to use the word redeem, but that there's something of value there for the light side.
Yeah.
Even though she clearly is not adopting the light side at this point, she is still very steeped in the dark side, very much believes in feeding her anger and pain in order to still accomplish what she needs to accomplish. But it's a very interesting dynamic of, they're not quite the two sides of the same coin, but there are a lot of similarities. And this is actually one of these team ups. I really enjoyed their time together, and I wanted to see a lot more of that. It would have been so cool to have a kind of a Ventress Ahsoka type of spinoff if that were in the and that was in the cards, but clearly their paths don't seem to cross again.
And so we'll probably end it here. We kind of set the stage for where we pick up Dark Disciple. You know, she's this bounty hunter for hire. She's hanging out at bars. She's hanging out on level 1312, 1313, somewhere around
Living
there.
the good life.
And yeah, living the good life, drinking a lot of heavy liquor. So yeah, and then we'll get into Dark Disciple. We'll take it to the end there. We'll get into a little bit of Quinlan Voss and just talk more about her arc and redemption. I don't know if we'll go there, but you know, at the very end, there's a couple things that happen to her, especially right at the very end. That, I mean, just
incredible.
The end of the novel is just amazing. Great stuff.
Don't get me too excited. We'll start talking about it now.
Yeah, that's right. And we're way over on time, so we won't get into. I'm not going to get into all of the the emails and that stuff. If you guys want to find us, you can see us at the in the show notes. Hit any of those links. Please join us in our Discord. If you want to talk more about this episode or just Star Wars in general, or you want to geek out on the Clone Wars, Save the Clone Wars kind of stuff. So you can find us there. Jonesy, any final thoughts before we cut it tonight?
No, if you guys want to get this a few days early to get in there and start talking early, check out our Patreon as well, because you'll usually get these episodes about 3 or 4 days in advance, and the conversation starts in a special Patreon channel. So I'd love to start having this conversation with everyone. I'm really excited to talk more about this.
And we've got a lot more Clone Wars era type stuff coming up. So we're pretty excited about that. So with that, we'll end the show, and we will see you all next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.